Hello, this is Karen Johnson with another in our series of historic videos sponsored by the Proctors Historical Committee. The date today is August 18th, 2017, and we have a real surprise for you today. Michael Eck, and
Howdy,
Michael's going to introduce himself with a wonderful song.
All right, let's do it. Never had a pocket full of money, never had a ruby ring. All I ever had was you, babe. Sit and listen to me sing. I've got those blues, empty pocket blues. Never had a pocket full of money, never had a big Cadillac. All I ever had was you, babe, and that's a gosh darn fact. I've got those blues, empty pocket blues. Money, money, money will make the grade. I'm so broke that a dollar bill, it looks like a window shade. I've got those blues, empty pocket blues. Well, some say the blues are sorrowful, say the blues are sad. When I sing the blues with you, they come out feeling glad. I've got those blues, empty pocket blues. Money, money, money will make the grade. I'm so broke that a dollar bill, it looks like a window shade. I've got those blues, empty pocket blues. I've got those blues, empty pocket blues.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Now, tell me why you picked that song.
Why did I pick that song? I picked that song because even though I'm involved with Proctors and all the great theater it does, we also do a lot of great music here at the theater. And I've been coming to Proctors since 1980, when I was 16 years old. Seen an incredible list of great musicians that I'd love to chat with you a little bit about, but one of the more recent ones was the first year I came here, Pete Seeger played here. And I had gotten to know Pete a little bit by writing a pretty intensive article about his banjo. And so the Eighth Step, one of our wonderful creative partners, Margie Rosenkrantz, asked if I could sort of help Pete out that day, and got to hang out, and it was the last time we got to talk. It was the last time I got to see him perform, so I thought I'd do a little Pete Seeger number from the 40s today, and that's called Empty Pocket Blues.
And you did all this when you were 16?
I didn't do all this when I was 16. No, I started playing music a little after that, and yeah. So.
But you did come, and what are your memories of coming here in 1980 when you were 16?
Well, the funny thing is, the first artist I ever saw here was a rock and roll guy called Pat Travers. He had a big song called Boom Boom Out Go the Lights at that time. So the first thing I saw here was a very loud electric band with a considerably small audience given the size of the room. But after that, I saw wonderful acts. The Kinks were here. I saw one of my all-time favorite songwriters, Gillian Welch, opening up for Norah Jones. I've seen Emmylou Harris here. Just recently, Brian Ferry was probably my favorite performance I've ever seen at Proctors. And of course, in the 80s, I got to see Johnny Cash here. I saw Johnny Cash a number of times, but seeing him here was something pretty special.
I got Johnny Cash to kiss me.
There you go.
That was really a highlight.
Now, I'm going to try and meet you with that very quick. In the early 80s, in the late 80s, sorry, I got to interview him on the phone. Hello, I'm Johnny Cash on the phone. I'm a huge fan, you know. So, well, we got talking, and there was a song I wondered if he still performed called "Any Old Wind That Blows," an old Dick Feller song. And he said, "You know, I don't do that anymore." Blah 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 blah. Well, and he did all his interviews at the beginning of a tour. Later on the tour, he was appearing in Massachusetts, and I went to see the show. And during the show, he said, "You know, about a month or two ago, a young man asked me about this song if I ever did it, and so I'm going to do it tonight for the first time. It's the first time we've done this song in probably 10 years. Well, the promoter brought me backstage, and I got to meet him. And I told him, I said, "Thank you for playing that song." And he started to explain the story. I said, "That was me." And he poked me in the chest and he said, "I played that for you." So that was my Johnny Cash moment.
He was a very casual, wonderful person.
Yeah, but you got kissed. That's pretty special.
You loved music, obviously.
From a very
young age. But later on, you transitioned to being a professional critic.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that happen, and what was involved?
I went to Christian Brothers Academy, and that was a college prep school, and you had to profile 2 jobs before you could graduate. The 2 jobs I profiled were musician and freelance writer, and at that point it was freelance writer specializing in music, which was it was a good thing. I got an English degree, pursued all that, started writing for local fanzines in the area as well as the college newspaper, learned various things, their editing, etc. So it was really, those 2 were the only things I wanted to do from a young age, and I just pursued them. And a friend of mine let me know that the music writer had moved on from the Times-Union, and I called them up and basically auditioned for them. They asked me to have a story for them within 4 hours, and then I wrote for them for the next 27 years until I came here.
So when you do criticism of shows,
Mm-hmm.
what's really involved in that? Do you talk to the talent ahead of time? What do you do?
Depends kind of on the market you're in. If you're in a big market like New York City, they have someone who does the feature articles. They interview the artist, they interview the director, they talk about the show ahead of time. Then they have a separate person who reviews the show. In a market this size, you often tend to do the feature and the review. So in terms of talking to the talent, etc., we'd do that in advance and have a feature piece that would run before the show came. Then once the show is in town, we review it and we express our opinion on it. So that's the difference between how those work. In terms of what I looked for in a review, it's a little hard to encapsulate. Hopefully, someone reviewing a show has an opinion, which sounds like I'm being snarky, but a lot of people don't have an opinion past that was good or that was bad. You have to be able to really have an opinion and express that opinion. You have to express that opinion in the context of the show, in the context of your knowledge of what's happened in the region, in the context of your knowledge of whatever the specific art form is, be it pop music, classical music, theater, etc. And so hopefully, and this isn't always true, but hopefully the person writing a review maybe has a little more knowledge than the average person about that topic. Beyond that, there's some real brass tack stuff. In the days of the internet, we can all express our opinions online, which I think is fantastic. It's a very democratic thing. But in terms of the way we worked, and I started writing professionally in 1987, and the things I used to file from Proctors, so I would file stories at Proctors from the Guild Room for many years, from the offices that were upstairs in the Carl Company where the Empire State Youth Orchestra is now. And we would very, very frequently, more times than not, particularly with theatrical shows, we'd be filing the review before the show was over. There'd still be a few minutes of the show.
So you missed the end.
So you'd miss the end, which is a little strange, and people could certainly, criticize that aspect of criticism. You didn't even see the whole show. But we had space to fill in the newspaper. So a large part of the critic's job, in addition to having the strong opinion, etc., is to be able to get all that done, spelled correctly, good grammar, etc., by 11 o'clock at night. The deadlines have moved back a little bit now, but it's still that you have to have all those aspects. You have to have the right facts, the right research, etc.
So what were you composing this on? I mean, I'm just interested in the detail of how you did it.
So when I started writing for the Times-Union, I'd written for different publications before that, still do some freelancing today, even though I'm at Proctors. Write a lot about musical instruments and such. When I first started in 1986, I would write the stories out in longhand on a yellow legal pad and then call the Times-Union. You remember the movies from the 40s, get me rewrite. I'd get a rewrite man and I would recite the story, and the very first story I had in the paper was about a group called the Fabulous Thunderbirds, and there was a sentence that said, drummer Fran Christina, a comedian. What I said was, a Canadian. What the paper ran was a comedian, so I learned next time I'm going to spell that when I give it to the rewrite guy. Then I started typing stuff out on a 40s Remington, and my mother would drive me up and I'd drop it off at the paper. And lo and behold, time moved forward, and you finally got a little Radio Shack Trash 80 computer with 8 lines of liquid crystal display, and you'd type on that, and you'd put it on a telephone with acoustic couplers that fit over the telephone, and they'd screech, and that's how the story would go over. And then we moved into finally, where it's the internet, and you do it all wirelessly.
That's really amazing.
Yeah,
I don't know
I've
why
kind
we
of
don't
seen a
think
lot of
about it.
technology with it, which is kind of strange.
I like the handwritten thing.
Yeah.
So when you're sitting in your seat, and there were sort of special seats the theater put the reviewers in. that are
Certainly. And as a publicist,
to
I
get
do that
out
now.
of.
Yeah, always on the aisle. Yep.
On the aisle, it's good.
And that came from, for example, technically you wouldn't need to be on the aisle now. It's a tradition now. I sat on the aisle seat for so long, I feel a little uncomfortable if I'm not on the aisle seat because I was so
Mike
used
Eck
to
is
it.
here again.
Yeah. But the reason for that was so you could get out to file. So that as people applauded for the curtain call, you could dash out and get to your newspaper office. In Troy, we used to go from the Troy Music Hall directly to the Troy office of the paper when we file there, or I'd get back here to the Guild Room or the payphones in the hall. The payphones that are still in the hallway of the Proctors Arcade, I can't tell you how many stories I filed on those payphones over the years. And that's why you sat on the aisle.
That's really amazing. I never thought about the process. It's
Yeah.
quite something.
Well, there's a number of plays, I'm going to blank on the titles of all of them, but different Moss Hart shows and stuff that were in the early days of Broadway, plays, not musicals so much, that talk about the reviews coming out the next morning. They'll start the second act and they'll all be looking at the reviews. And that's because that reporter dashed out and went right to the newspaper and typed it up, and it was in the next morning's
Yeah,
paper.
it became the subject, and they'd have parties.
Yeah.
So time has passed,
Mhm.
and you are now the publicist.
I am on the other side of where I used to be. So I used to get in contact with the publicist, or the publicist would get in touch with me. They'd tell me about the shows that were coming up, provide me a press release, set me up with seats to review the show, etc. I do all that now.
So how many reviewers are we dealing with in this market?
Depends on the show. The bigger the shows, the Broadway series, of course, the Key Private Bank Broadway series, we get more people in. For a show like that, we usually have 6 to 10 reviewers.
For the main media, and
Yep.
now we have lots of media.
We occasionally bring in bloggers and stuff. We're discussing bringing in more, but certainly there's a lot of new media that comes in as well.
So the bloggers would do what?
Same thing, they would review.
And people follow them on their blog?
They do.
Wherever it appears?
Yep. And so we sort of make a decision on each one, how much we invest in the bloggers, depending on the size of their audience, how quick they turn stories around. When we offer tickets to a reviewer, that has to be a discussion we have with the show's agents. It has to be a discussion we have in-house. And for example, if a blogger is not going to turn a story around until the show is out of Proctors, there's a question of who that's benefiting. And so in that case, we'd have an individual discussion, but we're pretty open about it.
So besides reviews, you do a lot of other things as the publicist.
Oh gosh, yeah. So I
talk
either
about some of those.
Yeah, well, one of the main units of publicity. So publicity is different than marketing. I'm in the marketing department. In marketing, we do all kinds of advertising. We do buys on radio, outdoor advertising on billboards, direct marketing either through snail mail or email. There's all kinds of aspects of that. Each one of those elements we pay for. As a general rule, what I do is get us attention that's free. Now, if I can place a story in the newspaper about the color purple, which is going to be coming in, that doesn't cost us anything. It also gives us a different way of meeting the public. So when you see an ad, even if you don't think about it, in your heart you're like, that's somebody trying to sell me something. When you see an article in the newspaper, that's advocacy. The newspaper only has so much room in any given week. So if they choose to write about an event at Proctors, they're saying we feel this might be a good thing for you to check out. So I have great relationships with so many in the local media. As a member of the local media for 30 years, I was able to understand what I enjoyed, what helped me do my job. from a press agent at any given place. So I try to serve those writers, broadcasters, the way I would have liked to have been served, getting me the information quickly. If I don't have the answer, I can get you the answer. So with Broadway, I tend to localize press releases. They give us one that we just make a few changes to. With Capitol Repertory Theater, we write all that from the ground up. Anything that's happening with the single shows or in the building, that's my job. I'm a spokesperson for Proctors, so if we have something happening here, good or bad, I tend to be the one who speaks to the media. And I do the PR. And PR to me is a very broad thing that ranges from just chatting with our wonderful ambassadors we have to answering questions from reporters.
So when Proctors entered into a relationship with UPH, what would your role have been with that?
One of the first things was to put together a press conference. And so I had to get in touch with Teddy Foster at UPH, Philip Morris, who's our CEO, members of their board, people from the company that was going to be doing the renovations, etc., gather them all together, make up a schedule for them to work from at the press conference, an agenda, and then contact all the local media and do follow-up to get them there at the event. I also worked with our social media team and our marketing team to have all different parts of that happen. So that was a great way to launch it. We got really wonderful coverage. And then as time goes on, I was just up there yesterday, we had Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie came through for a tour. He was with Assemblywoman Carrie Werner, and they were doing a tour around the region, and one of the stops was UPH. So we were there to greet him and talk with him a little bit, get some images for social media. So yeah, when we start putting lots of shows in there, I will also be doing publicity on each of those individual shows.
So when Carl Hastie comes and sees this project, the hope is that when we write grants,
You got
he'll
it.
be our friend.
You got it.
And so part of your job is to make sure that he has a good time
Right,
and gets all his questions answered.
right. And so in an event like that, I'll do a little research ahead of time to understand, Mr. Hastie's importance, Ms. Werner, what she does in the region. If the folks who are going to be speaking with them need any information, I'll help with that. So a lot of times before a press conference, I'll actually gather quotes from different people and bring those all together in the press release, talk with them. For a press conference like that one, we will actually have specific topics that each speaker is going to address so that they don't cover each other. It makes it very cogent. So, yep.
So it's interesting too to the public.
Yeah, and it's totally interesting to me. I love it. And it's funny. People say to me, "Oh, you must miss writing." I said, "I write all the time in my job." So
It's just like in the old days, you're writing away. How do you write right now? Just on computer and
mostly on a computer. Yeah.
then ship it electronically. at
Right, but
times.
I'm taking notes on various pieces of paper and notebooks all the time. One of the things I learned in all those years of reviewing was that as you're writing these things down in your notebook, the only time I needed to refer to my notebook when I was reviewing something was for an exact quote or the exact spelling of a name. The notes I took, by fixing them in the book, fixed them in my head. So I had those there.
I hope that's true when I take notes, but it isn't always. Well, Mike,
Well, there's also a difference if you wait, 2 weeks later, you might need to look at the notebook. But if you take those notes and write the story later that day, you don't need them as much.
now Proctors has a lot of news, and the news outlets have a certain tolerance for how much material they take. So what
I
is
call
your
it
role?
Proctor's fatigue.
What is your role to make sure that the things that are important to either UPH, CapRep, or Proctors are the ones that are really being covered?
I was in discussion with some powers that be here, even before I started, about the way Proctors presented itself to the media. Before I came aboard, there was a lot of what I call noise in the channel. There was too many press releases. They were too long. And sometimes the follow-up wasn't what I hoped for. So one of the first things I did when I came in was establish shorter press releases with the information that's needed. You leave a little out so that the reporter can have something to talk about, but give the information that's needed in a really clear way. Then the question of volume of press releases. And as we continue to grow, we're going to have 200 performances a year at UPH. That's going to be added on top of what we already do. So maybe for UPH, on certain shows, we'll just approach the media in Saratoga. Other ones will approach the media all around the region. Obviously, for every Key Private Bank Broadway show, we approach all the media throughout the region. But what we try to do is make up a schedule that will keep us present in the mind of the media, but not overwhelm them. There are times where we'll have, in the upcoming season, we've got 2 Broadway shows almost back to back. We'll look at the other events we have, and we'll have a talk in the marketing department and say, what can we kind of let work on its own here so that we're not hammering the media here? And I'm very conscious of that and try to build into the rhythm of what we issue space where the media can kind of relax. In the summertime, there's so much happening around the entire region. And Proctors as an entity has taken some steps to be more present in the summer or not to be. And in the 4 years I've been here, that's been sort of a back and forth discussion. If we're not doing a lot in the summer, I leave the press alone. It's a nice break for them. They're covering things elsewhere, and then they'll love to come back to us. I have a theory that I jokingly call Miracle on 34th Street. If you remember in Miracle on 34th Street, Macy's doesn't have what you're looking for. They send you to Gimbel's, they send you elsewhere. I work with the local reporters, some of them very much hand in hand. They call me up and say, I need a story for next week. Well, I'll tell them about something fantastic happening at, say, Homemade Theater in Saratoga or Albany Civic Theater in Albany, and say, there's a great story here. That's a sense I've developed from all those years of being a writer. By doing that, that makes them want to come back and work with us.
Because they know you'll help them.
Because they know I'll help them. And they also know that I feel very strongly all ships rise. So if we're helping them out and helping them out, it's just all the arts in the area are being boosted up. Mm-hmm. So I try very hard to keep, as I said, good relationships with the media through that, and be aware of that Proctors fatigue, how much we're pushing. We are the largest organization in the area. So much of what we do, I think all deserves to be covered, but we have to understand that there's other things happening too. So it's a little bit of a dance.
And psych out what the needs of the people you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Now, you've talked a lot about print media and electronic media. Do we do radio anymore?
We do radio, we do broadcast, we do all of that. I have a habit, which I should probably explain to people. I tend to use the word writers, meaning the whole lot.
Okay.
So yes, that includes broadcasters on TV, broadcasters on radio, bloggers, etc. One of the things I do mostly with Broadway shows and with shows at Capitol Repertory Theater, and the only reason is because they're long-run shows. When we have a Broadway show come in, it usually sits here for a week, sometimes 2 weeks. When we have a show at Capitol Repertory Theater, that can be anywhere from 2 to 5 weeks that we've got it there. So what we do is called in-town press, and that's where I contact the local broadcast media, radio and television, speak with them about the possibility of having an actor come by to chat, sometimes perform, and then we build an itinerary and I physically drive them around the region for a day or two, take them to all the different places. With Lion King, we did 2 full days of press, took them to TV, took them to radio, we had TV come into the theater, so there's a lot of that going on all the time.
Yeah. Well, now, aside from all this, you have a musical career.
Well, thank you. That's a generous word, but I like it.
Exercise in your non-work hours.
Yes. I've been playing semi-professionally since 1982.
So what's the difference between professional and semi-professional?
Professional is if you're making your entire living from music, which a number of local musicians do that by virtue of performing, teaching, working in other elements of music, maybe having a recording studio. In my case, I always thought a lot of the music reviewing was sort of part of that element because I made part of it from music. But I'm mostly a performer. I've produced a few records and things like that. I don't have a studio, I don't record, and I don't teach. So.
But you love doing it.
I love doing it, and I do it frequently. We were on the roof at the Tang Museum last night of Skidmore College with Ramblin' Jug Stompers, which is one of the bands I'm in. I'm in a group called Lost Radio Rounders. I play with the Berkshire Ramblers. I play with a group called Good Things. Working with a group called Coal Palace Kings again. I play solo, and that's just what I'm doing now. I've had lots of bands over the years.
And you go to hear a lot of music in.
I do. I don't see quite as much as I did when I was reviewing. When I was reviewing
compulsory.
the free ticket was
scheme.
helpful, you know. And so now I'm a civilian and I buy my tickets. But yeah, I still go to quite a bit of live music.
Is there any other subject you'd like to touch on?
I don't know. I think we hit most of them.
Because I think you're a wonderful asset to Proctors, and just because you have such breadth of knowledge and you really have that inside track with a lot of media writers.
Yeah. You know, one thing I'd like to point out, and this I didn't realize until I worked here. So, for example, when I was at the Times-Union, I did a story on when they renovated the Palace. The Palace Theater in Albany holds a very special place in my heart. I just hit the microphone. Because that's where I saw my first rock shows. And I still think for seeing a rock and roll show, the Palace is the best room in the area. But what I learned when I started working at Proctors and actually got to be involved with the renovation, not doing the work, but you know, bringing in media to talk about the renovation, it's such a beautiful room. It's just a beautiful space. And as part of my job, I go to New York frequently, I go to Broadway, I go out of town. We just went recently to the Bushnell, wonderful Art Deco theater in Hartford, Connecticut. But when I come home, it just feels like a special place. And the first show that was in Proctors when I became publicist was Les Mis. And after 20 years of sitting in my seat, I had Richard Lovrich, our creative director, take a fun picture of me in the empty theater, sitting in the seat I reviewed in all those years. Well, now I don't sit in that seat anymore, so I got to sit in the box seats, and I could barely watch Les Mis because I was just watching the people and the building and just looking at it in a different context. And so now when I get to go to these Broadway theaters and such, I realize what a gem we have. So.
And UPH is going to be a very similar
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, there's a reason it's called the Great Room, and that's because it's a great room.
And we don't know if Capitol Repertory Theater, as we continue to discuss future possible homes for it, we don't know, that may come out to be a very wonderful
you know,
experience.
that could come out differently, but at the moment we're still there on Pearl Street, and it's great.
Right, so things are going well?
When I first came in, I went down and had a chat with Maggie Mancinelli Cahill. I was a producing artistic director at the Rep. And it's funny because we developed a relationship over the years because I'd interviewed her so many times. And we even joked that towards the end of my term freelancing for the Times-Union, there would be more and more, off the record, Michael, and we'd just chat. And so, you know, for example, working with Maggie after knowing her in a different way for so many years is fantastic. Working with Philip, as I often say, I drink the Kool-Aid. He's a brilliant man, and he has these great ideas, and he's assembled a staff where he can say, here's the idea, make it happen. So it's a really exciting place to work. I held out till I was 49 before I took a day job. I was self-employed up until then. And if I'm going to have a day job, this is the one I want to have.
It doesn't hurt that much, right?
It doesn't hurt that much. No, it doesn't.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for being with us today and
Thank you.
sharing your experiences. And I want to thank our guests for watching the show today. Proctor's Historical Committee product to save for the future some of the wonderful things that are going on today at Proctor's. Thanks for watching.